After a minor stroke at my son's house, doctors told me I would never hear again. For 2 years, I lived in complete silence, watching my family speak without hearing a single word. Then, at my son's CEO inauguration party, a young waitress poured my drink and secretly signed to me, "I can help you hear again." Before I could react, she slipped me a note. 4 words. And I knew nothing in that room would ever be the same again. I am so grateful you are here with me today. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell me what city and country are you watching from. I read every single one. And if stories like this speak to you, subscribe to Revenge Dad so you never miss what comes next. A note: this story contains fictional elements crafted for reflection and entertainment. Any resemblance to names or places is coincidental, but the lesson inside it is entirely worth your time. I have spent 35 years of my life helping people hear. I built a company from nothing, a single research lab in Century City with secondhand equipment and a borrowed desk, into AudioMed Solutions, one of the most recognized names in medical hearing technology on the West Coast. I have sat across from patients who wept the first time they heard their grandchild's voice through a device I helped design. I have given lectures at UCLA, at Stanford, at conferences in cities I can no longer remember the names of. I understood the human ear the way a carpenter understands wood. Not just what it does, but what it wants to do, what it resists, what it yields to under the right pressure. None of that prepared me, for the night I sat in a ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Los Angeles and could not hear a single sound in the room. It was a Friday evening in November of 2022. The party was on the 32nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, 1,000 points of light, spread across the basin all the way to the horizon. The chandeliers above the crowd threw gold across everything, across the white tablecloths and the champagne flutes, and the 200 people in their finest clothes who had come to celebrate my son's inauguration as the new chief executive officer of AudioMed Solutions. My company, the company I had built with 30 years of my life. I sat at a table in the far corner of the room, the seat Daniel had arranged for me. He said so I would have a clear view of the stage. That was the official explanation. I had stopped believing Daniel's official explanations about 8 months ago, but I sat where he put me, because I had learned that being underestimated was the only advantage I had left. I watched the room the way I had taught myself to watch everything for the past 2 years. Through my eyes, not my ears. Mouths opened and closed. People leaned toward each other and laughed, their shoulders shaking with the force of it. Waitstaff moved between the tables with practiced efficiency, white napkins folded over their forearms. At the bar near the east wall, a group of men in dark suits clinked their glasses together and drank. A woman in a red dress threw her head back and laughed at something the man beside her said, her throat working with the sound of it, a sound I could not hear. 2 years of this. 2 years of watching the world perform itself in front of me like a film, with no audio learning to read every gesture, every shift of weight, every micro-expression that flashed across a face before the person could decide whether to let it show. 2 years of sitting at dinner tables and watching my son explain things to me in slow, careful mouth shapes, his voice raised, despite the fact that raising your voice does not help a man who cannot hear. 2 years of Emily's hand on my shoulder, warm, attentive, perfectly positioned for anyone watching. I had become very good at watching. Daniel took the stage at 8:15. He wore a navy suit I did not recognize, new, expensive, cut close. He stood at the microphone with the ease of a man who had been preparing for this moment for a long time, and he smiled the way people smiled when they finally had what they had been reaching for. He said things I could not hear. The crowd responded with expressions I could read: approval, admiration, the particular delight of people who enjoy being in the room when someone important arrives. Then he gestured toward me. I knew it was coming. I stood before the spotlight, found me smiled at the precise moment I had calculated the applause would peak, lifted my hand in a small wave that said, grateful and proud and not quite ready to let go all the things a father was supposed to feel at a moment like this. The crowd responded warmly. Daniel nodded at me from the stage, and for just a fraction of a second, something moved across his face that I could not name. I sat back down. My chest felt like something had been tightened inside it, a single slow turn of a wrench that I had learned not to show on my face. That was when she appeared. She was young, late 20s, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back and the focused expression of someone who had mapped the room before she walked into it. She wore the uniform of the catering company, a white shirt and black vest, and she moved between the tables with the unhurried confidence of a person who understood that invisibility was a professional skill. She reached my table and leaned forward to refill my wine glass, and as she set the bottle down, she placed something else beside it. A piece of paper folded into quarters slipped beneath the base of my wine glass so smoothly that I almost missed it. I looked up at her. She did not look at me, not directly, not yet. She straightened, adjusted the position of the bottle, and then as if she had simply forgotten something, she glanced back. Our eyes met. Her hands moved, not nervously, not quickly, with the deliberate precision of someone who had practiced this, who knew exactly what she was doing. American Sign Language. I had spent enough years working with the deaf community to recognize it, to understand it, even though I had never needed it for myself. Until 2 years ago. Her hands said, "You are not truly deaf." My fingers went cold around the stem of my wine glass. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I felt it in my throat. I kept my face exactly where it was, pleasant slightly and distant, the expression of an old man content to watch from his corner. Every nerve in my body was screaming. Her hands moved again, slower this time, making sure I caught every word. "I can help you hear again." She picked up the wine bottle and moved to the next table without looking back. I waited 30 seconds. Then I unfolded the paper beneath my glass. 4 words written in small, careful print. "Don't react. They're watching." I set the paper down. I picked up my wine glass and brought it to my lips and looked out at the room, at Daniel laughing with a group near the stage, at Emily at the front table, with her hand curled around her champagne flute. Her eyes moving across the room, in the practiced sweep of a woman who never fully relaxed in public. My hands were not shaking. I made sure of that. But inside my chest, something that had been compressed into a very small space for a very long time had just lurched back toward the surface, raw and urgent and desperate in a way I had not let myself feel in months. Beside my wine glass, the young woman had left something else, something I had not noticed until now. A small object, no larger than a thumbnail, dark and unremarkable, sitting in the shadow of the glass, where no one would see it unless they were looking directly at the table from above. I looked at it. My throat tightened so sharply that I had to press my jaw together to keep my expression from changing. I knew what it was. I had spent 30 years working with technology built on the same principles. I knew the form factor, the approximate weight, the type of circuitry that something that size could contain. The question was not what it was. The question was how this young woman knew it existed and how long it had been sitting in my ear without me knowing. The carpet on Daniel's staircase was dark red, almost brown in low light, the kind of color that swallowed shadows. I remember it because it was the last thing I saw clearly before the world tilted sideways and took everything with it. It was a Tuesday evening in March of 2021. I had been staying with Daniel and Emily for 3 days, visiting from my own house in Brentwood. We had finished dinner. I was heading upstairs to read. One moment I was on the 4th step from the top, my hand on the rail, thinking about nothing more consequential than whether I had left my reading glasses in the car. The next moment, the staircase was rushing toward my face, and I could not explain why. I heard Daniel shout my name. That much I remember, his voice high and fractured with shock coming from somewhere below me. Then the floor arrived, and everything went dark. I woke up in a room at UCLA Medical Center with a blood pressure cuff on my left arm, and Daniel sitting in the chair beside the bed, his elbows on his knees, his face in his hands. When he heard me move, he looked up, and the relief that crossed his face was so sudden and so complete that it made my chest ache. Whatever else came after, I want to remember that moment. Honestly, my son's face when he realized his father was still alive. That was real. "Dad." His voice cracked on the single syllable. He reached over and wrapped both hands around mine. "You scared me to death. You scared me absolutely to death." "I'm fine," I said, though my head felt like it was packed with wet sand. "What happened? Minor stroke," he said. "That's what they're calling it. Minor." He let out a breath that was halfway to a laugh and halfway to something else entirely. "Nothing about tonight felt minor. Dr. Warren Holt was the neurologist assigned to my case, a steady, careful man in his late 60s, who explained things the way good doctors did, without condescension and without false comfort. He told me the stroke had been small, that I had been extraordinarily lucky, that with proper management I could expect a full recovery of most functions. Most functions. I noticed the word he chose. So did Daniel. "What does most mean?" Daniel asked. He was leaning forward in his chair, his jaw tight. Dr. Holt folded his hands on the edge of the bed. We'll monitor your hearing over the next several days. There may be some impact to auditory processing. It's too early to say how significant. The impact, as it turned out, was total. It did not happen all at once. That is the thing. No one tells you how gradual it is, how the world does not go silent in a single moment, but retreats from you slowly, one frequency at a time, like a tide going out. The first morning, I noticed the machines in my hospital room had grown quieter. The second morning, I could not hear the television mounted on the wall unless I turned the volume to maximum. By the third morning, a nurse came in and spoke to me from the doorway, and I watched her mouth move and understood nothing at all. I pressed the call button. When she came back, I pointed to my ears and shook my head. Her face changed. She went to find Dr. Holt. He confirmed it 2 days later, with a battery of tests I had administered to patients myself over the course of my career. Complete bilateral hearing loss. The stroke had disrupted the auditory processing centers in my brain, not the ears themselves, but the neural pathways that translated sound into meaning. He said the probability of natural recovery was very low. Very low. Not impossible. Very low. I sat with that number for a long time. It was Daniel who suggested the clinic in Burbank. He came to me on my 5th day in the hospital, pulling his chair close to the bed. His voice dropped to the careful register he used when he was about to propose something he was not sure I would accept. "I've been doing research," he said. "There's a specialist, Dr. Philip Crane. He runs a private neurological clinic out in Burbank. He's been working on a new protocol for auditory nerve recovery. It's not mainstream yet, but the early results are significant." He paused. "I know it's not UCLA, but Holt has basically told us there's nothing more he can do. This man might be able to help." I looked at my son's face, the dark circles under his eyes from 3 days of sitting in hospital chairs. The way he was holding himself tight across the shoulder's jaw set the posture of a person who had been frightened and had not yet fully come down from it. "You trust this person?" I asked. Daniel nodded immediately. "I vetted him thoroughly, Dad. He came highly recommended." I asked Dr. Holt about Crane. Holt said the name was not familiar to him, but that private neurological research was a broad field, and he could not speak to every practitioner. He did not recommend it. He did not forbid it either. He said the choice was mine. I made the wrong choice. The clinic occupied a suite of offices on the 2nd floor of a medical building on Olive Avenue in Burbank, clean, professional, unremarkable. Philip Crane was a compact man in his early 40s with quick hands and the focused manner of someone who moved through his days at a pace slightly faster than everyone around him. He shook my hand firmly and spoke to me as if I could hear every word I lip-read well enough by then to follow him, and explained the protocol in terms that sounded credible to me, which should have been a warning in itself. I knew enough about auditory science to recognize the language, which meant I also knew enough to miss the gaps in it if I was not suspicious. I was not suspicious. I was a father who had scared his son to death on a staircase, and I wanted very much to be fixable. The session lasted 40 minutes. I remember a reclining chair, something cold applied near my right ear, the faint hum of equipment that I felt more than heard. I remember growing sleepy in a way that felt slightly wrong, too heavy too fast. I remember thinking I would ask Crane about that when I woke up. When I woke up, Daniel was driving me home, and the sun was going down over the San Gabriel Mountains, and the radio was on. I could see the dashboard display moving with the sound of music. I could not hear a single note. 2 days later, Dr. Holt confirmed it. Whatever residual function had remained before my visit to Crane's clinic was gone. The auditory nerve pathways had gone completely dark. He had no medical explanation for the sudden deterioration. He said these things sometimes happened. He said he was sorry. I sat in his office and pressed my hands flat against my thighs to keep them from shaking and nodded at the right moments and thanked him for his time. In the car on the way back to Daniel's house, I watched Emily driving her eyes on the road, one hand on the wheel, the other resting in her lap. And I remembered something from the night before, the clinic appointment. I had been passing the kitchen doorway and caught a glimpse of Emily on her phone, her back to me. I had thought nothing of it at the time, but I had been close enough to read her reflection in the kitchen window, just for a moment, just a fragment of what her mouth was forming. "After tomorrow, we won't have to worry anymore." Sitting in that car watching her hands on the steering wheel, I turned that sentence over in my mind for the first time and felt something cold and very quiet settle in behind my sternum. I did not say anything. I had no proof. I had nothing but a sentence fragment and a feeling I did not yet know what to do with. So I pressed my hands against my thighs and watched the city go by in silence and told myself I was imagining things. I was not imagining things. I used to tell my patients that losing a sense was not the end of perception, that the brain was adaptable, that other pathways would strengthen to compensate, that a person who could not hear would begin to notice things that hearing people walked right past. I said it because it was true. I just never expected to prove it by living it. In the 2 years I spent in that house in Pasadena, I became the most observant person in any room I entered. And no one noticed because no one thinks to watch the old man who cannot hear. The house was a 5-bedroom colonial on a quiet street in the foothills, the kind of neighborhood where the driveways were long and the hedges were high and people waved to each other from their cars without actually stopping to talk. I had bought it for Daniel and Emily as a wedding gift 6 years earlier, a gesture I had been proud of at the time, the kind of thing a father did when he wanted to demonstrate that his son's happiness was worth more to him than the check. My bedroom was on the second floor at the end of the hall, farthest from the master suite. Daniel said it was quieter there, better for my rest. I did not argue. I learned to read lips with a focus that would have impressed a professional interpreter. I learned to position myself in rooms so that I had sight lines to multiple faces at once. I learned that people revealed extraordinary things when they believed they were not being observed. Not because they were careless, but because they had categorized me as someone who could not receive the information. I was furniture. I was the portrait on the wall. I was the old man in the corner, with the vacant expression who needed someone to speak slowly and directly at his face. I was watching everything. Emily changed the combination on the safe in the master bedroom closet 3 times in 6 months. I knew because I had known the original combination. Daniel had given it to me the first year I stayed with them in case of emergency, and one afternoon I tried it out of habit and the door did not open. The second time I noticed her at the keypad with her back to the door, her fingers moving in a sequence I could not see. The third time, I did not even try. I already understood what it meant. Daniel signed documents at the kitchen table on evenings when he thought I was asleep. I was not asleep. I sat at the top of the stairs in the dark and watched the light under the kitchen door and waited. Once I came down for water at 11 o'clock, and he swept a folder off the table so fast he knocked over his coffee cup. He apologized, cleaned up the mess, asked if I needed anything. His hands were not quite steady as he mopped the counter with a dish towel. That was in October of 2021. In June of that same year, Maggie came. Maggie Osei had been my personal assistant at AudioMed Solutions for 22 years. She had started when she was 36, a sharp and methodical woman who had kept my professional life organized with an efficiency I had never fully appreciated until I no longer had access to it. She knew where every document lived, remembered the name of every client's spouse, and had once talked a furious investor out of pulling his funding over the phone in under 8 minutes. I trusted her more than I trusted most people I had known 3 times as long. She came to the house on a Wednesday afternoon. Emily let her in. I watched from the upstairs landing as the 2 of them stood in the entryway, Maggie in her good coat, the charcoal one she wore to important meetings, her handbag held in both hands in front of her. Emily smiled and gestured toward the living room. Maggie's face did not change the way it should have if she were simply visiting an old friend's father. We sat together in the living room for 40 minutes. Maggie spoke carefully, making sure I could read her lips, asking about my health, telling me small things about the office. But her eyes kept moving to the doorway, to the hall, to the window. When Emily appeared in the doorway with a tray of coffee and set it on the table, Maggie's hands tightened on her handbag strap. Just for a moment, just enough for me to see. Before she left, she pressed my hand between both of hers and held it for a beat longer than a farewell required. Then she was gone. I found out later, much later, what had happened 3 days before that visit. Daniel had called Maggie into his office and placed a document in front of her. He wanted her to sign a statement confirming that in the months before my stroke, I had demonstrated signs of cognitive decline, confusion, poor judgment, difficulty following complex discussions. He wanted it for the conservatorship file he was building with his attorneys. Maggie had looked at that document for a long time. Then she had looked at Daniel and said no. She was terminated the following Friday. Budget restructuring, he told HR. He gave her a severance check and a non-disclosure agreement and told her to have it reviewed before she signed it. She did not have it reviewed. She was 65 years old and had just lost the job that had been the center of her professional life for more than 2 decades, and she was frightened, and she signed it. But before she cleared out her desk, She printed 23 pages of financial records that had caught her attention over the previous 18 months. She did not know exactly what they meant. She knew they were wrong. She took them home and locked them in a drawer and told herself she would figure out what to do with them when she was less afraid. Then there was Sophie. Sophie Calloway was 4 years old and gap-toothed and completely unimpressed by the kind of grief that made adults go quiet and careful around her. She was Daniel and Emily's daughter, my only grandchild, and she had decided sometime in her 3rd year of life that the correct response to a grandfather who could not hear was to find other ways to make sure he knew she was talking to him. She would climb into my lap and take my hand and press it flat against her cheek so I could feel the vibration when she laughed. She would draw pictures and hold them up 6 inches from my face with an expression of enormous expectation. She would tap my knee in patterns too. Fast, 1, slow, 2, fast, 1, slow. That meant nothing in any formal language, but that I came to understand as simply, "I am here, Grandpa. Are you here too?" Yes, I wanted to tell her. I am here. More here than anyone in this house knows. One afternoon in September of 2022, Sophie took my hand and pulled me upstairs while Daniel was on a work call, and Emily was at her office in Beverly Hills. She led me into the master bedroom with the confidence of a child who had not yet learned that some rooms carried restrictions. She pointed at the low dresser on Emily's side of the room, specifically at the second drawer, the one with the small brass lock that I had never seen Emily open in front of anyone. Sophie's mouth moved. I caught it clearly. "Mommy goes there every weekend, Grandpa. She says it's for you." I crouched down and looked at the drawer. Then I looked at Sophie's face, earnest, certain, completely unaware that she had just handed me something important. I kissed the top of her head and took her back downstairs for a snack, and I did not let myself think too hard about what Emily kept in a locked drawer that was apparently meant for me. Not yet. I did not have enough to think with yet. That changed in August of 2022. I woke at 5:43 in the morning to what I first believed was a dream. A low, formless sound pressing at the edges of sleep, the auditory equivalent of light seen through closed eyelids. I lay completely still, with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, and I listened with everything I had. A car on the street outside, the engine note shifting as it passed, distant and muffled and imprecise, like hearing through a wall of water, but there. Undeniably, impossibly there. My heart hammered so hard against my ribs that I pressed my fist to my chest just to feel something solid. I did not move for 11 minutes. I just lay there and listened to the neighborhood, wake up fragments of sound, not words, not music, just the raw texture of a world that had been absent for 17 months and was now sending signals again, faint and unreliable and more precious than anything I could name. 10 to 15%, maybe less. Not enough to understand a conversation, not enough to hear my own name spoken from across a room. Enough to know the world still made noise and that some part of my brain was still capable of receiving it. I did not tell Daniel. I did not tell Emily. I did not tell Dr. Holt. Because I was not certain enough to risk being wrong in front of people who were building a legal case around the idea that I was broken beyond repair. And because I had begun slowly, and without fully admitting it to myself, to understand that being underestimated was the only weapon I had. 3 weeks later, I opened the old email account I had used for internal research correspondence back in 2003, an account that existed on no device in Daniel's house, accessible only through a public library computer 6 blocks away, known to exactly 2 people. I had been to the library 4 times in the previous month. I told Emily I was attending a senior reading program. She had patted my hand and said that sounded lovely. There was one new message. The sender's address was one I recognized immediately. Maggie. 2 sentences, Richard. I kept copies of everything. Tell me when you're ready. I read it twice. Then I closed the browser, thanked the librarian on my way out, and walked back to Daniel's house in the morning sun, with my hands in my pockets and the first thing that had felt like hope pressing quietly against the inside of my chest. That evening, I sat on the edge of my bed in the room at the end of the hall and typed 2 words into the old account on the phone Maggie had left for me in a library book 3 weeks earlier. A prepaid device registered to no one that I kept taped behind the baseboard of my closet. I'm ready. Thomas Reed's office was on the 14th floor of a building on South Grand Avenue, 3 blocks from the courthouse, which was either a coincidence or a deliberate choice by a man who had spent 30 years watching people underestimate the importance of proximity to power. Knowing Thomas, it was deliberate. I had been his client for 15 years. He had handled the original incorporation of AudioMed Solutions, the patent filings, 2 rounds of investor agreements, and the trust documents after Helen passed. He was the kind of lawyer who remembered everything and volunteered nothing, who returned calls within the hour and sent invoices that were always exactly what he said they would be. I trusted him the way I trusted very few people, not blindly, but based on 15 years of evidence. I had contacted him through Maggie's prepaid phone, a text to a number I had memorized years ago. His response came back in under 20 minutes: tomorrow, 10 a.m., use the parking entrance on 5th. He met me in the lobby himself, which told me he understood the situation required discretion. We rode the elevator to 14 without speaking. I could lip read well enough in a quiet space, but elevator conversations were difficult, and when his office door closed behind us, he turned and looked at me with the expression of a man who had been holding something back for a while. "How long have you known?" he asked, speaking carefully so I could follow. "Known what specifically?" I said. "There are several things I've known for different lengths of time." Thomas almost smiled. He gestured to the chair across from his desk and sat down. "Let me tell you what I know," he said, "and then you tell me what I'm missing." What Thomas knew was considerable. Daniel had contacted him 8 months earlier, requesting a full transfer of all legal documentation related to AudioMed Solutions. The incorporation papers, the shareholder agreement, the board minutes going back to 1994. Thomas had refused politely, but absolutely explaining that, as independent counsel, he represented my interests, not Daniel's, and that no transfer of any kind could occur without my written authorization. Daniel had pushed back. Thomas had pushed back harder. "He sent a letter through his own attorneys," Thomas said, leaning forward with his elbows on the desk. "Claimed you had authorized the transfer verbally before your stroke. I told them verbal authorization was not sufficient for documents of this nature, and that if they filed a motion, I would respond accordingly." He paused. "They haven't filed yet, but I believe they're waiting on something." "The conservatorship," I said. Thomas nodded. "Once a court appoints Daniel as your conservator, he gains legal authority to act on your behalf in all financial and business matters. At that point, he wouldn't need your signature or my cooperation to do anything he wanted with the company." I had understood this in the abstract. Hearing it stated plainly in that quiet office above South Grand Avenue made something in my stomach drop with a cold finality that I had to breathe through carefully. "Explain to me exactly what he filed," I said. Thomas slid a document across the desk. "A petition for conservatorship of the person and estate under California. Probate Code 1801. He said, "The grounds cited are inability to communicate effectively, inability to manage financial affairs independently, and risk of exploitation due to impaired judgment." He let me read for a moment. "The supporting evidence includes a neurological assessment from Dr. Holt and a report from a Dr. Philip Crane, who apparently treated you at a private clinic in Burbank." My jaw tightened. I kept reading. "The petition also references the shareholder agreement," Thomas continued, "specifically the provision granting you 51% controlling interest and veto rights over any sale of the company as a whole. His attorneys argue that these rights cannot be meaningfully exercised by someone who cannot communicate or manage his own affairs." He folded his hands. "In other words, Richard, the conservatorship is not really about your care. It's about your stock." I set the document down. "There's a buyer," I said. Thomas opened a second folder. "A South Korean technology conglomerate. The deal is structured as a full acquisition. Every asset, every patent, every piece of intellectual property AudioMed has produced in 30 years. The price being discussed is $38 million. He let that number sit for a moment. "The letter of intent was signed 6 weeks ago. The final purchase agreement is scheduled for execution in approximately 3 weeks. 3 weeks?" I pressed my hands flat against the arms of the chair to keep them steady. "He can't close without my approval," I said. "The shareholder agreement is explicit. Any sale of the company in its entirety requires written consent from the majority shareholder. That's me." "Correct," Thomas said, "unless a court has determined that you are no longer capable of providing that consent, in which case your conservator acts in your stead." He looked at me steadily. "You have rights in this process, Richard. Under California Probate Code 1454, You are entitled to an independent medical evaluation, a physician of your own, choosing not one appointed by Daniel's team. That evaluation carries equal legal weight in the conservatorship proceeding. I want Dr. Holt, I said immediately. Thomas raised an eyebrow. The same doctor who issued the original diagnosis. The same doctor who issued the original diagnosis, I confirmed. Because when his new evaluation contradicts the old one, there will be no argument about bias. Thomas looked at me for a long moment. Then he wrote something on his legal pad. I'll make the appointment, he said. He stood to refill his coffee from the credenza behind his desk, and when he turned back, something in his expression had shifted, not quite hesitation, but the particular quality of care that preceded difficult news. There's something else, he said. Something I should have mentioned first, perhaps, but I wanted you to have the full picture of the legal situation before we came to this. He set his coffee down and opened the bottom drawer of his desk. He removed an envelope cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges, sealed with tape that had dried and gone brittle with age. My name was written on the front in handwriting I recognized so immediately and so viscerally that my chest contracted like a fist had closed around it. Helen's handwriting, my wife who had been gone for 10 years. She gave this to me in 2013, Thomas said quietly, along with a set of instructions. She said, and I want to be precise about this because she was very specific. She said that if anything ever happened to you that affected your hearing, I was to find an independent hearing specialist, someone outside whatever medical establishment you had been brought into, someone who could look at you without any prior assumptions about what they would find. My throat had closed to the diameter of a straw. I stared at the envelope on his desk. She said you would be too trusting to think of it yourself, Thomas continued. She said that was not a weakness. She said it was the best thing about you and the most dangerous thing about you at the same time. I reached out and picked up the envelope. The paper was smooth under my fingers, cool, impossibly real. I turned it over. The seal on the back was intact. Thomas had not opened it. She said not to give it to you yet, he said. She said you would know when. I held the envelope in both hands and felt 10 years of absence pressing against the back of my eyes with a force I had not expected and was not prepared for. My vision blurred. I blinked hard once, twice, and set the envelope carefully on the desk in front of me. Not yet, I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. But soon. Thomas nodded. He picked up his legal pad. There is one more thing, he said, his tone returning to the measured register of professional business. 2 weeks ago, I received a call from a man who identified himself only by name Kevin Walsh. He asked several questions about AudioMed's research history and about a private clinic in Burbank. He did not say who he worked for, but the questions he asked were very specific. Richard and the way he asked them suggested he already knew more than he was letting on. I looked up from the envelope. Kevin Walsh, I repeated. I wrote it down, Thomas said. He slid a notepad page across the desk. The name was there in Thomas's careful handwriting, with a phone number beside it. I don't know who he is, but I thought you should. I picked up the page and looked at it for a long moment. Then I folded it and put it in my coat pocket beside the envelope with Helen's handwriting on the front, and I stood up to leave. Outside the window, downtown Los Angeles spread itself across the basin in every direction, indifferent and enormous, and full of people who had no idea that a 66-year-old man with damaged hearing and 3 weeks left on a deadline had just decided he was done being underestimated. She was waiting for me at the edge of the east corridor near the door that led to the terrace with the unhurried expression of someone who had calculated exactly how long it would take me to make a decision and had been correct. I had sat with the folded paper and the small object beside my wine glass for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I know because I counted something I had started doing in the months after my hearing went using numbers to keep myself anchored when the silence pressed too hard. Then I tucked my napkin beside my plate in the way that signaled I was stepping away briefly and walked toward the corridor with the careful, unhurried pace of a man going to find the restroom. Lily was already moving when I reached her. She did not look at me directly. She pushed through the terrace door with one hand and held it open at a natural angle the way you held a door for anyone, and I walked through it as if I had been heading there all along. The terrace ran the length of the east side of the 32nd floor, separated from the ballroom by a wall of glass. Outside, the November air came off the basin with a clean edge cool enough to notice, not cold enough to drive anyone out who actually wanted to be there. The city stretched below us in every direction, 100,000 lights blurring into each other. At the edges, the grid of streets cutting dark lines through the glow. Lily moved to the far end of the terrace and turned to face me. Up close in the ambient light from the city below, she looked younger than I had estimated inside, and more alert with the specific watchfulness of someone who had spent years paying attention in rooms where most people were not paying attention at all. She spoke carefully, making sure I had a clear sight line to her mouth. "My name is Lily Harper," she said. "I was a hearing rehabilitation technician at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center for 4 years. I learned American Sign Language as part of that work. We interacted with the deaf community regularly, and basic ASL was considered standard in our department. 3 months ago, a lawyer named Thomas Reed contacted me through the clinic where I now volunteer. He told me you needed someone with my background to look at you in a context your son could not control." "What did he tell you to look for?" I asked. "He did not specify," Lily said. "He said I would know it when I saw it, and I did." She glanced toward the glass wall, toward the party, toward the 200 people who had no idea this conversation was happening 20 feet from their champagne flutes. "The way you respond to certain vibrations, the micro-expressions when ambient sound spikes. A person with complete bilateral hearing loss does not react to sound even at the subconscious level. You do. You have been reacting for months. I noticed it the first time I served your table 40 minutes ago. My hands had gone very still at my sides. "What is it?" I said. "What is in my ear?" A bone conduction jamming device," she said. "It works by generating a continuous low-frequency signal directly against the mastoid bone behind your ear. The signal does not damage your cochlea or your auditory nerve. It creates interference. Your brain receives input, but the signal is corrupted. Over time, the brain learns to discard input. It cannot make sense of the same way it filters out persistent background noise. The result presents identically to severe sensorineural hearing loss on standard testing." I stared at her. 35 years of auditory research, and what she was describing was elegant in its brutality, not destruction, but disruption. Not damage, but deception. The brain not broken, but trained painstakingly to ignore what was right there. "How long does recovery take?" I said. "After removal." "Minutes to hours in most cases," Lily said. She reached into her vest pocket and removed something small, a thin implement barely larger than a pen cap that I recognized as a modified otoscope. "I can remove it right now. Less than a minute. There will be no pain." I looked at the implement, then I looked at her face. "You have done this before," I said. Something moved in her expression, not quite grief, not quite anger, but the compressed residue of both. "My father had something similar happen to him," she said. "Different circumstances. By the time I understood what I was looking at, it was too late to help him." Her jaw tightened for a fraction of a second before she controlled it. I became very good at recognizing the signs afterward. It is a particular kind of useless skill, knowing exactly what you are looking for, once the person who needed you most is already gone. I held her gaze. Then I nodded. She was right about the time. 50 seconds perhaps, a little less. I felt pressure, a faint warmth, a sensation of something releasing that I had not known was there. Lily stepped back and held up the device between us, smaller than I had imagined, no larger than a pencil eraser, dull, metallic, inert. I looked at it for a moment. Then I looked away. And the world came back. Not all at once, not the dramatic rush I had sometimes imagined. It arrived the way dawn arrived in November, gradually, and without announcement. The city below, first a low, constant hum of traffic rising from the grid of streets in slow waves. Then the wind off the basin moving across the terrace with a sound like a slow exhale pressing against the rail, lifting the edge of my jacket lapel. I stood very still, with my hands on the railing, and let it reach me. The wind. Of all the things I had been waiting 2 years to hear, I had not anticipated that the first one would be the wind. My eyes burned. I pressed my jaw together and breathed through my nose until the burning eased. Lily stood 3 feet away and did not speak and did not move, and I will be grateful for that restraint for the rest of my life. Then the terrace door opened 6 inches, and a fragment of the party spilled out music voices layered over each other, and beneath all of it, close and clear and unmistakable, 2 men talking near the door on the other side of the glass. My son's voice. After 2 years, I would have known it at half the volume. "By this time next month," Daniel said, "the old man won't be a problem anymore." A second voice, lower, careful. "The The conservatorship timeline is still holding. It's fine, Daniel said. It's all fine. Stop worrying about it. The door closed. The voices cut off. I stood at the railing with both hands gripping the cold metal and the wind moving through my hair and the city burning below me, and something inside my chest that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the particular clarity that arrives when you have been suspecting something for a long time and have finally irrevocably been proven right. Lily stepped beside me and waited. "That was my son," I said. My voice sounded strange, too loud, too resonant, like hearing a recording of yourself for the first time. "I know," she said. I turned and looked at her. Her face in the city light was calm and serious, and absolutely certain. "What do you want to do?" she said. My hands were not shaking. After everything I had just heard after 2 years of waiting, my hands were absolutely steady on that railing. "I want to go back in there," I said, "and I want him to think I still cannot hear a single word." Lily looked at me for a long moment after I said it. The city hummed below us. The wind moved between us. Then she nodded, not the nod of someone who agreed with a plan, but the nod of someone who had expected exactly this answer and had already thought through what came next. "All right," she said, "then we need to be smart about it, because right now you have the advantage of surprise, and the moment you lose that, you lose everything." "Walk me through it," I said. She turned slightly so her back was to the glass wall, so that anyone inside the ballroom who glanced toward the terrace would see nothing more than two people having a quiet conversation in the night air. "You have no physical evidence," she said. "The device is out. Whatever was in your ear is now in my pocket the size of a pencil eraser with no chain of custody and no documentation of where it came from. If you walk back in there tonight and tell Daniel you can hear, he will deny everything. His attorneys will argue your sudden recovery proves the original diagnosis was always uncertain. The conservatorship petition stays on the table. The sale moves forward, and you have spent your one moment of surprise on a confrontation that changes nothing." The cold logic of it pressed against me, the way the November wind pressed against my jacket, insistent, factual, impossible to argue with. "How long do I need?" I asked. "Enough time to build something they cannot simply deny," Lily said. "Medical documentation, financial records, witnesses who will hold up under cross-examination. Thomas Reed told me you have approximately 3 weeks before the purchase agreement is scheduled for execution." She paused. 3 weeks is workable, barely, but workable." "Thomas talks to you directly," I said. "He called me last week to confirm I was still on board and update me on the timeline." Something shifted in her expression, a dry appreciation. "He is very careful, your lawyer. He does not say more than he needs to. I respect that in a person." I looked at her. "He told you about Helen, about her instructions." Lily met my eyes steadily. "He told me your wife had left instructions in his care, that she had met Emily once in 2013, and that something about the meeting troubled her enough to prepare for a possibility she could not name." She paused. "He said Helen told him you would be too trusting to think of protecting yourself this way. He said she meant it as a compliment." The burning came back behind my eyes. I turned my face toward the city and breathed carefully through my nose until it passed. 30 years of marriage, and Helen had seen what I had missed from a single afternoon in the same room with a woman she had met once. I had spent 10 years not knowing she had done that, and now I was standing on a terrace 32 floors above Los Angeles, knowing that her preparation was the only reason I was having this conversation at all. "She knew," I said. "It came out quieter than I intended." "She knew something," Lily said carefully. "She did not know exactly what, but she knew enough to prepare for it." She let that sit for a moment. "That is its own kind of love, Mr. Calloway. The kind that works even when it cannot be seen." I pressed my palms flat against the railing, feeling the cold metal anchor me, and pulled myself back to the practical. "What do I need to do?" I said. "Go back inside," Lily said. "Sit at your table. Finish your evening the way you were always going to finish it. Do not look at Daniel any differently than you have been looking at him all night." She reached into her vest pocket and removed a small card, plain white, a phone number in ballpoint pen, nothing else. "Text this number from a phone that cannot be traced back to you. Thomas will coordinate from there." I took the card and slid it into my breast pocket without looking at it. "One more thing," Lily said, her voice dropping just slightly. "When this is over, when you are standing in front of whoever needs to hear the truth, you are going to have to decide what you want from it, not just legally, not just the company." She looked at me directly. Because Daniel is your son. I have seen people destroy everything in the name of justice and spend the rest of their lives sitting in the ruins, wondering if it was worth it. Her voice did not waver, but something behind it did something old and personal and carefully contained. I am not telling you what to choose. I am telling you to know what you are choosing before you choose it. I looked at her, the daughter of a man no one had helped in time. I hear you, I said. She nodded once. Then she straightened, adjusted her vest, and became the catering staff again. Professional, unhurried, and visible in the way certain people could become invisible when they chose to. "Give me 90 seconds before you follow me in," she said, and stepped back into the light and noise of the ballroom without looking back. I stood at the railing and counted, slowly, deliberately, the way I had been counting everything for 2 years, using numbers to hold myself in place when the world tilted. Then I pushed through the door. The sound hit me like stepping into a river. Voices and music and glassware, all arriving simultaneously, overwhelming in a way I had not anticipated. My eyes watered. I blinked twice and kept walking and arranged my face into the pleasant, slightly distant expression I had worn all evening. Emily was at the door. She had not been there when I went out. She was there now, a fresh glass of champagne in one hand, watching me with an expression perfectly calibrated to read as casual. Her eyes moved from my face to the terrace door and back. "Richard." She spoke slowly, clearly, the performance of consideration she had maintained for 2 years. "Getting some air?" I nodded and managed a small smile. The smile of a man who had stepped outside and found it pleasant. The smile of a man who had heard nothing, suspected nothing, and was looking forward to sitting back down. She studied my face for 2 full seconds. I held her gaze with the mild, unfocused patience of a man who could not hear what she was thinking and did not need to. Then she smiled the smile she used when something had been confirmed to her satisfaction and touched my arm briefly as I passed. The moment her hand left my arm, I felt my jaw unlock. I had not realized how hard I had been clenching it. I walked back to my table, sat down, and looked out at the room. Daniel was near the bar, laughing with men in suits. Emily was moving toward the front table posture, easy and unhurried. They believed I was exactly what I had been an hour ago. They believed nothing had changed. I had 3 weeks. I picked up my wine glass, took a slow, deliberate sip, looked at my son across the crowded room, and thought not this time. The coffee shop in Eagle Rock was the kind of place that had been there long enough to stop trying to be anything other than what it was. 4 booths along the wall, a counter with 8 stools, a chalkboard menu that had not changed in years, and windows that let in the pale morning light of a November Saturday without making any particular effort to flatter it. Maggie had chosen it. She had texted the address through the prepaid relay the previous night, and I had been there at 7:53:11 minutes before she arrived long enough to choose a booth in the back corner, with a clear sight line to both the entrance and the street outside. Old habits. I had not known I still had them until the last few weeks had called them back. She came in through the front door in her charcoal coat, the same one she had worn to the house in Pasadena 5 months ago, and she scanned the room the way careful people scanned rooms quickly and without making it obvious. When she found me in the corner, something in her shoulders released just slightly, as if she had been holding a breath she did not want anyone to see her holding. She slid into the booth across from me and looked at my face with the focused attention of a woman who had been reading faces professionally for 22 years. "You can hear me," she said. Not a question. She had always been faster than people gave her credit for. "Since last night," I said. "Completely." Maggie pressed her lips together. Her eyes went bright and sharp. Not tears, not yet, but the thing that came before them when a person had been carrying something heavy for a very long time and suddenly understood they did not have to carry it alone anymore. She reached across the table and gripped my forearm with both hands, her fingers pressing in hard, and held on for a moment that needed no words because some things did not require them. Then she let go, straightened, and pulled a manila envelope from her bag and set it on the table between us. 23 pages, she said. I printed them the afternoon before Daniel called me into his office. I did not know what I was going to do with them. I only knew that once I was gone, I would not have access anymore, and that these numbers were wrong in a way I could feel but could not yet explain. I opened the envelope and spread the pages across the table. Financial records transfer authorizations, vendor payment confirmations, account routing details. I had reviewed AudioMed's financial documentation every quarter for 30 years. I had taught myself to read these pages the way other people read newspapers. What I saw made the coffee in my stomach go cold. Walk me through it, I said. Maggie leaned forward. Starting in January of 2021, 2 months before your stroke, there are payments from the AudioMed Research and Development Fund to a vendor listed as Pacific Neurological Associates. 18 payments over 14 months. Total amount transferred $2,340,000. She looked up at me. Categorized as research consultation fees, no corresponding deliverable, no research report, no patent application. The money went out and nothing came back. Where did it go after Pacific Neurological? I said. A Nevada business account. From there, wire transfers to a personal account at a private bank in Henderson, Nevada. She met my eyes. The account holder is listed as E. Cross, not Emily Cross Calloway, E. Cross, her name before she married your son. The air in the booth compressed around me. E. Cross, written in the flat, affectless typeface of a bank transfer record, surrounded by routing numbers looking exactly as ordinary as the transaction had been designed to look. She registered Pacific Neurological Associates before she married Daniel, I said. The LLC was filed in Nevada in 2019, Maggie said. 18 months before your stroke. This was not opportunistic, Richard. This was planned. I sat with that. The coffee shop was filling up families, couples. A man at the counter arguing quietly on his phone about something that had nothing to do with any of this. Ordinary Los Angeles Saturday morning, entirely indifferent to what was being laid out on the table in the back corner. Tell me about the document Daniel asked you to sign, I said. Maggie's jaw tightened. She set both hands flat on the table. He called me into his office on a Tuesday morning in June of 2021. He was very calm. That was the thing I remember most, how calm he was. Her voice carried something between anger and grief. He needed a statement confirming a pattern of cognitive difficulty before your stroke, from someone with long professional knowledge of you. And you refused, I said. I told him I had worked with you for 22 years and had never observed anything resembling cognitive decline, and that I would not sign a document saying otherwise. Her hands pressed harder against the table. 3 days later, HR called. Budget restructuring, 12-week severance, and a non-disclosure agreement I had 5 days to sign without legal counsel under conditions that made walking away feel impossible. She exhaled slowly. I signed it, Richard. I am not proud of that. That NDA is not enforceable, I said. Signed under duress without counsel to conceal criminal conduct, Thomas will have it invalidated. You did nothing wrong. He took your job and then frightened you into signing a piece of paper. That is on him, not on you. Maggie's chin lifted, not quite pride, but the careful relief of someone told that a weight they had been carrying was never truly theirs. I'm sorry I waited so long, she said, her voice pressing close to something it was holding back. I was afraid of what it meant, that Daniel had done this. Neither did I see it coming, I said, and I had considerably more at stake. She almost laughed short, involuntary, immediately composed. Then she reached back into the envelope and produced one final page. Philip Crane, she said. The man who runs Pacific Neurological. He worked at UCLA Medical Center Neurology Department until 2017. She placed the page on the table. Daniel worked in business development at UCLA Medical from 2013 to 2016. They were at the same institution for at least 2 years. I looked at Crane's name on the archive staff directory. Then I looked up at Maggie. That they knew each other before any of this started, I said. They had to, she said. This did not begin with a stroke on a staircase, Richard. It began a very long time before that. I gathered the pages back into the envelope. 23 pages. $2,340,000. A name in Nevada that predated everything. I picked up the envelope and held it. It did not feel heavy enough for what it contained. Stay close, I said. Stay quiet. And if Daniel contacts you about anything, you tell me before you respond. She nodded once firmly, the nod of someone who had decided and was not going back. I left at 8:47 and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine and opened the envelope one more time. E. Cross, Pacific Neurological Associates, Nevada, 2019. 2 years before my stroke. Emily had been building this before she had a reason to build it. I started the car. 19 days left, and I had just found the thread that would unravel all of it. Daniel called it a family meeting. He sent the message through Emily, a handwritten note slipped under my bedroom door on a Thursday morning, which told me two things immediately: that he wanted it to feel personal rather than legal, and that he did not trust electronic communication to carry the right tone. The note said, Sunday 11 o'clock, the main sitting room, and that there were some important matters regarding my care and future that the family needed to discuss together. I read the note twice. Then I folded it and put it in the drawer beside my bed and spent the rest of Thursday and all of Friday letting Daniel believe I was exactly as unaware as he needed me to be. Sunday arrived gray and cool, the kind of Los Angeles November morning that reminded you the city did have seasons. They were just subtle enough that you had to pay attention to notice them. I came downstairs at 10:50 in the pressed gray slacks and dark blue sweater I wore when I wanted to look like a man who was trying to present himself well without quite managing it. The sweater was slightly worn at one elbow. I had chosen it deliberately. They were already assembled when I walked in. The sitting room had been arranged with the careful purposefulness of people who had thought about where everyone should be positioned and had acted on those thoughts without discussing them aloud. Daniel sat on the sofa facing the door beside him. A man in his 50s, I did not recognize, silver-haired, well-dressed, with the particular posture of someone accustomed to rooms where decisions got made. Emily sat in the armchair to Daniel's left, her legs crossed at the ankle, a legal pad on her knee. Near the window, a woman in her 40s with reading glasses pushed up on her head sat with a manila folder in her lap and the carefully neutral expression of a court-appointed professional who had learned not to bring her own opinions into these situations. And in the chair against the far wall, positioned slightly apart from everyone else in a way that suggested he was present but not quite a participant, sat a man I did not know. Late 40s, heavy-set, with the look of someone who had arrived expecting a formality and was not entirely comfortable with the domestic setting. He met my eyes briefly when I entered and then looked away, which was interesting. People who had nothing to hide did not look away first. I found out his name later, Marcus Webb, but that morning he was simply the man by the wall who could not hold eye contact. Daniel stood when I came in. He crossed the room and took my arm gently the way you guided someone who might need steadying and steered me toward the wingback chair, positioned at the center of the arrangement facing the sofa. The chair with the best sightlines to the door and the worst exit options. I sat down and folded my hands in my lap and looked around the room with the mild, slightly bewildered expression I had been practicing for months. The man beside Daniel on the sofa leaned forward. He spoke slowly and with exaggerated clarity the way people spoke to me. Now each word shaped with the careful deliberateness of someone who had been told I could lip-read if they were patient enough. "Mr. Calloway," he said, "my name is Gerald Marsh. I'm an attorney representing your son and his family. I want you to understand that everything we're discussing today is in the interest of your well-being and your future care. No one here wants anything other than what's best for you." I looked at Gerald Marsh and thought, you have been paid to say that, and you are saying it very smoothly, and I have heard smoother. The woman with the reading glasses introduced herself as Sandra Okafor, a court-appointed investigator assigned by the probate court to assess the circumstances of the conservatorship petition. She explained slowly and clearly that her role was independent, that she worked for the court, not for any party in the proceeding, and that her report would reflect only what she observed and documented. I nodded at appropriate intervals. Emily had not spoken yet. She sat with her legal pad and her crossed ankles and watched the room with the focused attention of someone who had choreographed this scene and was monitoring it for deviations from the script. Gerald Marsh opened his briefcase and removed a document thick-tabbed with post-it flags marking certain pages. He set it on the coffee table in front of me and oriented it so I could read it, which was a thoughtful touch, and told me he was good at his job. "That this is the petition for conservatorship of the person and estate," he said. "Under California Probate Code 1801, the court is being asked to appoint your son Daniel as your conservator, the person authorized to make decisions on your behalf regarding your finances, your health care, and your general welfare." He turned to the first flagged page. "The petition is supported by medical documentation from Dr. Warren Holt of UCLA Medical Center and Dr. Philip Crane of Pacific Neurological Associates, both of whom have assessed your condition and concluded that your current level of impairment prevents you from managing your own affairs." I looked at Philip Crane's name on the page, the man who had put something in my ear and called it a treatment. His name was here now, in a legal document being used as medical authority. My hands wanted to shake. I pressed them flat against my thighs and kept them still. Daniel leaned forward. He spoke more slowly than he needed to, with the exaggerated care of someone performing concern rather than feeling it, though I wondered watching his face whether he knew the difference anymore. "Dad," he said, "we all just want to make sure you're protected, that the people making decisions about your money and your health are people who understand your situation and care about you." He paused. "This is not about taking anything away from you. It is about making sure you have support." He believed that I realized. Some part of him had constructed a version of this story in which he was the responsible son, stepping up for a father who could no longer manage, and he had lived inside that version long enough that the edges had gone soft. That was perhaps the most difficult thing to sit with. Not the cynicism of it, but the self-deception, the way a person could do something wrong and build themselves an architecture of justification sturdy enough to live in. Emily finally spoke. She leaned slightly forward in her armchair and said with precisely calibrated warmth, "Richard, we know this is a lot to take in. There's no rush. We can take as much time as you need. There is a particular kind of lie that wears the shape of kindness so well that it becomes almost impossible to distinguish from the real thing." Emily was fluent in that language. She had been speaking it to me for 2 years. Sandra Okafor cleared her throat gently and addressed me directly. "Mr. Calloway, I want to make sure you understand that you have rights in this process. You have the right to legal representation of your own choosing. You have the right to an independent medical evaluation by a physician you select. Under California Probate Code 1454, any evaluation you obtain carries equal legal standing in these proceedings." She paused. "Do you understand what I'm explaining?" I nodded. Yes, I understood perfectly. Gerald Marsh reached into his briefcase and produced a single-page document and a pen. He set both on the coffee table in front of me and turned the document so I could read it. It was a consent form, an agreement to proceed voluntarily with the conservatorship arrangement, waiving the right to a formal hearing. "If you're comfortable with what we've discussed today," he said carefully, "signing here would simply indicate your willingness to proceed cooperatively. It would make the process significantly simpler for everyone involved." He left the pen resting beside the form and sat back. The room waited. I looked at the form. I looked at the pen. I looked at Daniel, who was watching me with the expression of a man who had convinced himself this was an act of love. I looked at Emily, who was watching me with no expression at all, because she was very good at that. I looked at Marcus Webb in his chair by the wall, who was looking at his own hands. Then I picked up the pen. The room relaxed. I felt it a collective easing of held breath, a fractional dropping of shoulders. Gerald Marsh allowed himself a small professional nod. I turned the consent form face down. I drew the legal pad that sat on the corner of the coffee table toward me, the one Emily had brought for herself and had not yet used. I positioned it in front of me, and I wrote 4 words, clear, deliberate, unhurried each letter, formed with the care of a man who understood that what he was writing was going to matter. "I want my own lawyer." I turned the pad around and pushed it across the coffee table so everyone could read it. The room did not just go quiet. It went the kind of still that happens when something expected has not occurred, and the people expecting it have not yet processed the gap between what they anticipated and what they received. Daniel's face went through 3 expressions in the space of 2 seconds: surprise, recalibration, and then something that was not quite anger, but lived in that neighborhood. Emily's crossed ankles uncrossed. Gerald Marsh blinked twice, and then composed himself with the professionalism of someone who had been in unexpected rooms before and knew how to recover. Marcus Webb looked up from his hands. Sandra Okafor reached into her manila folder and produced a business card. She leaned forward and set it on the coffee table in front of me within my reach. "That is absolutely your right," she said clearly and directly. "I will note it in my report." Daniel stood. He walked to the window and stood with his back to the room. For a moment, his hands clasped behind him, looking out at the backyard, the garden Helen had designed 20 years ago, and that Emily had quietly redesigned 2 years after we planted it. His shoulders were set in the line I recognized as the one he used when he was managing something he had not planned for. Emily picked up her legal pad from the armchair and set it back on the coffee table on top of the consent form, a small gesture. A gesture that said, "We are not done here. We are simply pausing." I sat in the wingback chair with my hands folded in my lap and my expression pleasant and mild, and looked at no one in particular, and thought about Thomas Reed, who was expecting my call this afternoon, and about Dr. Holt, whose appointment was scheduled for Tuesday, and about 19 days that had become 11 days. I set Sandra Okafor's business card in the breast pocket of my sweater, beside the card Lily had given me 4 nights ago on the terrace of the Ritz-Carlton, and I waited for someone to tell me what happened next. If you are still with me on Revenge Dad right now, type "still here" in the comments, so I know you have not left. Because what is coming next is the part I have never told anyone in full. A quick note, this story contains fictional elements woven in for reflection and entertainment. Some details may not align with events. If that is not the kind of content you are looking for, it is completely okay to step away now. I chose Warren Holt because he was the man who had told me I would never hear again. That might seem like a strange reason. Most people given the choice would prefer to be evaluated by someone who had not already formed a conclusion about them. Someone whose professional opinion was still unwritten. But I had spent 30 years working in a field where assumptions were the most dangerous thing in any room, and what I needed from this evaluation was not just accuracy. I needed it to be undeniable. If Warren Holt, the neurologist who had examined me with his own equipment, who had reviewed my scans and run my audiograms and written the words "complete bilateral hearing loss" in my medical record, if that same man now sat across from me and said something different, there was not a judge in Los Angeles County who could reasonably ignore it. His office was on the 4th floor of the neuroscience building at UCLA Medical Center in Westwood, a room I had sat in twice before, under very different circumstances. He met me at the door himself, which was not standard. Standard was a nurse then, then the doctor. He closed the door and directed me to the examination chair without speaking, and I noticed that he did not ask how I was, which meant he had been thinking about this appointment since Thomas Reed's office called to schedule it, and he had decided he did not want to go through the motions of pleasantries before he understood what he was dealing with. That told me he was already worried. The examination took 40 minutes. Holt worked with the methodical focus of a man who understood that the results he was generating were going to be placed in front of a court, and that every test needed to be documented with a precision that left no room for challenge. He ran the same battery he had run 2 years ago: pure tone, audiometry, speech recognition, threshold, acoustic reflex, testing, auditory, brainstem response. He ran each one twice. When he was done, he sat down at his desk across from me and looked at his own notes for a long moment with the expression of a man who had found something in his kitchen that he could not explain and was trying to determine whether the explanation was better or worse than the mystery. He looked up. "Your hearing has recovered completely," he said. "Bilateral across all tested frequencies. Speech recognition is in the normal range. Auditory brainstem response is consistent with a person who has never experienced significant hearing loss." He paused. "These results are not consistent with the results I documented 2 years ago. They are not consistent with any known natural recovery pathway for the type of neural damage I believed you had sustained." His voice was level and precise, and carried underneath it the particular tension of a man who was being very careful about what he said next. "Richard, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer me directly." "Go ahead," I said. "Did you receive any treatment in the past 2 years, any intervention at all, medical or otherwise, that you have not disclosed to me?" "No," I said, "not by choice. But something was removed from my ear 12 days ago by a hearing rehabilitation technician named Lily Harper. A small device." I watched his face. "I think you may want to hear about it." Warren Holt heard about it. He sat very still while I described what Lily had explained on the terrace: the bone conduction jamming signal, the low-frequency interference, the way the brain learned over time to discard input it could not process. His hands were flat on the desk in front of him, and his face had gone through 3 distinct phases: professional skepticism, dawning recognition, and then something that was not quite horror but occupied the same neighborhood. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up a pen and wrote something on his notepad. "The frequency range you described," he said without looking up. "The interference pattern, that is consistent with a technology that was in prototype development approximately 3 years ago." He looked up. "I am aware of it because 2 of the institutions working on early versions of that technology were research partners with UCLA Medical." He set the pen down. "One of them was AudioMed Solutions." My chest tightened. "You're certain?" Holt did not answer immediately. He set the pen down and looked at his own notes for a moment. I sat back. The prototype had been early stage when I last reviewed the research pipeline, a theoretical application buried in a quarterly report I had skimmed in the months before my stroke. I had not recognized it when Lily described it on the terrace because I had never seen it fully realized. I had only ever seen it as a possibility on paper. Someone had turned it into something else entirely. I am certain enough to need to make some calls, Holt said. Richard, if what you are describing is accurate, if a device derived from that prototype was intentionally placed in your ear to simulate hearing loss, then the medical documentation I produced 2 years ago was generated on the basis of falsified conditions. I submitted that documentation to a court proceeding. His jaw worked slightly. That is something I take very seriously. That is something I am obligated to address. He leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment, the way people did when they were conducting a rapid internal inventory and did not like what they were finding. Then he sat forward. I need to tell you something, he said. Something I did not connect at the time and have not thought about since, but which I am now thinking about very hard. He clasped his hands on the desk. Approximately 2 weeks after I filed your original diagnosis with a court, UCLA Medical Foundation received a research grant. The donor was listed as the Calloway Family Fund. The amount was $500,000. He met my eyes. The grant was designated for neurological research in my department. I was informed of it as a matter of routine. Large gifts to the foundation are typically communicated to the relevant department heads. I did not connect it to your case because there was no reason to connect it. Families of patients sometimes donated to the institutions that treated them. It was not unusual. I looked at him. But now it seems unusual. Now it seems like something I should have looked at more carefully, he said, and his voice carried the particular weight of a man who was going to be examining his own conduct with a great deal of rigor in the coming days, and was already not enjoying the prospect. The timing, the amount, the specificity of the designation. He exhaled. I am going to contact the California Medical Board this afternoon. I am also going to contact the district attorney's office because submitting falsified medical documentation in a legal proceeding is a criminal matter under California Penal Code 132. And if that is what happened here, I am both a victim of it and inadvertently a participant in it. He stood and I stood, and he shook my hand with the grip of a man who understood that what he was about to do was going to cost him professionally in ways he could not yet fully calculate, and had decided to do it anyway. I will have the new evaluation filed with the probate court by Thursday, he said. Thomas Reed will receive a copy simultaneously. I thanked him and walked out. The neuroscience building had a parking structure attached to it on the east side, 4 levels open on the north face, looking out over the Westwood Hills in the middle distance. I had parked on the 2nd level. I came out of the elevator and started toward my car and stopped. A man was leaning against the hood of the car parked beside mine. Not my car, the one next to it. He had the look of someone who had chosen that particular spot deliberately and had been waiting long enough to be comfortable about it. Late 30s, medium height, wearing a blue button-down shirt with no tie, and the kind of dark slacks that were just formal enough to suggest a professional context without announcing it. No badge visible. No identifying anything. He straightened when he saw me, but did not move toward me. Mr. Calloway, he said, my name is Kevin Walsh. I've been watching Philip Crane for 18 months. He paused. I think you might be the person I've been waiting for. I looked at him. His posture was relaxed in the specific way of someone who had been trained to appear relaxed, the stillness of a person who moved through the world at a level of awareness most people did not operate at. I recognized it, the way you recognized a technical vocabulary not from personal experience, but from enough time around people who had it. You called Thomas Reed, I said. 2 weeks ago. I did, Walsh said. He did not seem surprised that I knew. I was trying to get a sense of the situation without revealing the investigation. I apologize for the indirection. He reached into his breast pocket and removed a credentials wallet, opened it, and held it toward me long enough for me to read it. FBI. Special Agent. His name matched. How long have you known about Crane? I said. 18 months of active surveillance, Walsh said. Longer than that of general interest. He came on our radar through a financial fraud case in Nevada. The Pacific Neurological Associates, LLC, showed some patterns that warranted a closer look. He closed the credentials wallet and slid it back into his pocket. We identified at least 4 individuals who received treatment at his clinic under circumstances similar to yours. 2 of those individuals are no longer living. He held my gaze steadily. You are the first person who is still alive, still cogent and in possession of enough documentation to give us something we can actually use in a federal proceeding. The parking structure was cold and smelled of concrete and exhaust. Somewhere below us, a car alarm went off briefly and then stopped. What do you need from me? I said. Right now, nothing, Walsh said. Right now, I need you to keep doing whatever you are doing and be very careful. Crane has people who monitor his former clients. We believe he became aware that something had changed in your situation approximately 4 days ago. His expression did not change, but something in it sharpened. Do not go anywhere alone that you have not told someone trustworthy about in advance. Do not use your regular phone for any communication related to this matter. And if anything unusual happens, anything that does not feel right, use this. He produced a card and held it out. Plain white handwritten number, nothing else. I took it and looked at it. Then I looked at him. The night of the party, I said. 11 days ago. There was a message, don't react. They're watching. Walsh nodded once. That was us, he said. We were watching the clinic's surveillance on the event. When Lily Harper made contact with you, we were not certain whether that was a complication or an opportunity. We sent the message to buy time. I put the card in my coat pocket. I thought about Thomas Reed's notepad, about Lily's card, about Sandra Okafor's card. I was accumulating cards from people who were trying to help me in rooms Daniel did not know about, and each one of them represented a piece of something that was slowly taking shape. 4 victims, I said, and 2 of them are gone. Yes, Walsh said. I nodded. I got in my car. I sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel and looked through the windshield at the concrete wall of the parking structure and thought about Philip Crane in his office on Olive Avenue in Burbank, with his quick hands and his focused manner, and his protocol that sounded credible enough to miss if you were not looking for the gaps. He had done this before me. He had done it to people who were not still here to tell anyone. I started the engine and drove toward the exit and called Thomas Reed from Lily's prepaid phone and said, we need to move faster. Daniel had suggested the visit himself, which told me everything I needed to know about how confident he was. He had come to my room the evening before. I went to see Holt and explained slowly and carefully that several of the senior staff at Audio Med had asked about me and that it would mean a great deal to morale if I could stop by. He said it the way he said most things lately, with the surface warmth of genuine concern and the structural precision of someone who had thought through the subtext before he walked through the door. A father who visited his own company was a father who was still present, still connected, still the patriarch. It was good optics for the transition. It was good optics for the conservatorship. It was in every way that mattered to Daniel's current situation, useful. I told him I would go Thursday morning. He smiled and said, that was wonderful. I went Thursday morning. Audio Med Solutions occupied 3 floors of a glass tower on Avenue of the Stars in Century City, a building I had chosen in 2004 because the address carried a certain weight in the industry, and because the lobby had good acoustics, and because I had believed at the time that the details of a place communicated something about the intentions of the people inside it. I still believe that. I just no longer believed I could control what those details communicated. The parking structure was underground. I came up through the elevator and walked through the lobby and showed the security desk. My identification, the guard on duty, was new. Someone I did not recognize, which was its own small data point, and took the elevator to the 22nd floor, where the executive suite and the main research division both lived. The hallway looked the same, and did not look the same. This was the particular disorientation of returning to a place you had been absent from, long enough for small changes to accumulate into something you could feel but not immediately itemize. The carpet was the same. The light fixtures were the same. The photographs on the east wall were the same photographs I had chosen when we moved into this space 12 years ago, but they had been rehung in a slightly different order, and one of them, a framed shot of the original research team from 2001, had been moved from eye level to a position near the ceiling, where it was technically visible but practically unnoticed. I stood in front of that photograph for a moment. 11 people, including me, including Maggie, standing in a room full of equipment that was already obsolete by the standards of the work we would do with it. We were all much younger. I remembered the day it was taken, a Thursday in October, 2 weeks after we had secured our first major hospital contract, the first time I had believed the company would survive past its 3rd year. My throat did something I had not expected. I pressed my lips together and kept walking. Maggie was at her temporary desk near the south end of the floor. She had explained to me that after her termination, Daniel had brought in a new executive assistant, and that the temp agency supplied rotating support staff who used whatever desk was available. The casual cruelty of that arrangement was not lost on me. She had spent 22 years in a private office 2 doors from mine, and now she sat at a folding table near the copy room. She looked up when she heard me coming. Her face did exactly what faces did when they had been holding something carefully for a long time, and suddenly did not have to. It released quickly and without her permission into something honest. She stood up and gripped my hand with both of hers and squeezed once hard and then composed herself before anyone passing through the hallway could read the gesture as anything other than a warm greeting between an old man and a former colleague. "You look well," she said clearly for anyone who might be watching. "I feel well," I said equally clearly, "better than I have in some time." We sat at her desk under the fluorescent lights, and I allowed her to go through the performance of showing me departmental updates, graphs, project timelines, nothing sensitive, while she passed a second envelope under the edge of the desk to my left hand, which I moved to my coat pocket without looking down. "The research division is doing excellent work," she said, pointing at a graph that meant nothing to either of us. "I can see that," I said. "You've all maintained a high standard." The envelope in my coat pocket was thin. I did not know yet what was in it. I would know when I was back in my car. Afterward, I walked the floor slowly, the way a proud founder walked the floor of his company, nodding at people I recognized, stopping to shake a hand here and there, accepting the expressions of genuine warmth from the staff members who had worked with me long enough to mean it. Some of them looked at me with a particular quality of attention that I recognized as the look of people who knew more than they were saying, and had decided that today was not the day to say it. That was useful information, too. I passed the research lab on the north side of the floor. My research lab, the room where AudioMed had effectively begun, where I had spent entire weeks in the early years working through problems that had no solution until they did. Through the window, I could see the benches and the equipment, all of it slightly dustier than I would have tolerated, lit by the particular flat quality of a room that was used but not inhabited. Someone worked in there. It was not the same as someone living in there. I put my hand flat on the glass and stood there for a moment. 30 years. Not the years themselves, the work inside the years. The problems solved and the problems abandoned, and the solutions that arrived at 3 in the morning, while Helen slept on the couch by the window, with a book open on her chest. The sound of a patient hearing her daughter's voice for the first time. The grant applications and the board presentations and the arguments with investors who believed that medical technology was a product category and not a calling. All of it lived in this room in a way it did not live anywhere else. And standing outside the glass, looking in, I felt the distance between what this room had been and what it had become in my absence, with a force that sat behind my sternum, like something heavy, placed there without permission. I took my hand off the glass and turned around. And through the glass wall of the conference room at the far end of the hall, I saw them. Daniel was at the head of the table. Beside him sat Marcus Webb. I recognized the posture before I registered the face, the particular way Marcus held himself in rooms where he was trying to appear less invested than he was. Across from Marcus sat a man I did not recognize, compact and precise in the way of someone who arrived at meetings with everything already decided. On the table between them lay a document, a contract. From the thickness of it, from the way the pages were tabbed and flagged with the colored stickers that meant signature required here and here and here. Marcus picked up a pen. He signed something, slid it across the table. Daniel picked up a pen. His hand moved across the page with the ease of a man for whom this action was the conclusion of a very long project. The unrecognized man collected the pages, tapped them into alignment, and placed them in a leather portfolio case. I looked at my watch. It was 11:23 in the morning. I was standing in the hallway of the company I had founded, watching my son finalize a transaction that would remove everything I had built from the only hands I had ever trusted it to, and I was doing it from the outside of a glass wall because I was the old man who came to visit on Thursdays, and no one thought to close the conference room blinds. Maggie appeared at my elbow. She did not look at the conference room. "The second set of records I mentioned," she said quietly and quickly, facing away from the glass. "Everything from the R&D fund, every transfer. I added 3 more months I found last week. She was very still. It's in the envelope. Thank you, I said. How much time do you have? She asked. I looked at my watch again. The man with the leather portfolio was closing his briefcase. Marcus Webb was putting his pen away. Daniel was straightening the edge of the documents with the flat of his hand. Not enough, I said, but more than they think. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button and waited with my hands in my coat pockets, the right hand resting on top of the envelope, the left hand touching the card from Agent Walsh. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and turned around, and for a moment, the entire 22nd floor was visible to me. The photographs on the wall, the fluorescent lights, the glass-walled conference room where Daniel was laughing at something the compact man said, and the folding table near the copy room where Maggie had turned back to her screen with her shoulders set in the line of someone who had done what she came to do. The elevator doors closed. I rode down to the parking structure and got in my car and opened the envelope. More transfer records. 3 additional months. The numbers marched down the page in their flat, affectless typeface, each one representing a decision that someone had made in a room I was not in, using money that I had spent years generating, moving it toward a purpose I had never authorized and would never have permitted. Every dollar of it, $2.3 million, had come from research funding I had built over a decade and been moved to a purpose I would never have permitted. I folded the pages and put them back in the envelope, and put the envelope in my briefcase and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. Then I took out Lily's prepaid phone and sent a single message to the relay number that reached Thomas Reed Conference Room, meeting today, 11:23. Marcus Webb. Present. Documents signed. We are out of time. Thomas's response came back in 4 minutes. Holt files tomorrow. Court date confirmed for the 25th. 8 days. 8 days. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking structure into the California mid-morning, and I thought about a photograph on a wall near the ceiling, and a research lab through a glass window, and a folding table near a copy room, and I thought 8 days is enough. It had to be. I had spent 15 years not thinking about Marcus Webb. He had spent 15 years thinking about me. That asymmetry I realized when I sat down across from him at a coffee shop on Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica said something about both of us that neither of us was entirely proud of. He was already there when I arrived, a heavyset man in his late 40s, with the careful stillness of someone who had decided in advance how this meeting was going to go and was now waiting to see whether reality cooperated. He had chosen a table by the window. The Pacific was visible 2 blocks west, gray and flat under the November overcast. I sat down and ordered coffee and looked at him directly. "You can hear me," he said, the same words Maggie had used. People who knew the situation all arrived at the same sentence first. "Since 11 days ago," I said. Marcus Webb looked at me for a long moment. Something moved across his face that was not quite guilt and not quite relief, but occupied the space between them uncomfortably. 2011, he said. Audio Med Solutions. You turned me down in the final interview. You said my credentials didn't check out. They didn't, I said. You had listed a graduate degree from a program you attended for 1 semester. He nodded slowly. I know. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. I told myself for years that you were arrogant, that you held people to an unreasonable standard, that AudioMed's loss was going to be someone else's gain. He looked out at the street. It took me about 5 years to admit I was just angry. After that, I kept the story going out of habit. And when Daniel came to you with this deal, I said. He knew about the interview, Marcus said. He brought it up in our second meeting casually, like he was just making conversation. He said you, and he had a complicated relationship, that you had always been difficult about the company, that this transition was overdue. His jaw tightened. He chose me because he knew I wouldn't ask too many questions, that I had a reason not to look too hard at what he was doing to make it happen. He picked up his coffee and set it back down without drinking. I didn't know about the device, he said. His voice had gone flat and careful, the voice of a man stating something he needed, stated clearly for his own sake as much as mine. I knew the conservatorship was happening. I knew it was convenient. I told myself it was a family matter and not my business. He pressed his lips together. That was not an honest accounting of what I knew and chose not to examine. I put the financial records on the table between us. 23 pages, the transfers, the routing, the name E, cross at the end of the chain. Marcus looked at them without touching them. His face had gone the color of old concrete. If this deal closes, I said, "You are attached to every page of that. You signed documents this week in full knowledge that the controlling shareholder's authorization was being obtained through a court proceeding that was built on falsified medical evidence." I kept my voice level. "That is not a family matter. That is federal wire fraud." Marcus stared at the pages for a long time. Outside, a car horn sounded twice. A woman walked past the window with a dog on a leash, the dog straining towards something on the sidewalk with the single-minded urgency that dogs brought to everything. "What do you need?" Marcus said finally. "The recording from the board meeting 3 days ago," I said. "The one where Daniel said the conservatorship would clear the path. And I need you to contact the acquisition team and tell them the deal is on hold pending a legal review." Marcus looked at me. "I lose the commission, the relationship with Daniel, possibly more." "Yes," I said. "You do." He sat with that. I did not fill the silence with reassurance because I did not have any to offer that was honest. "Your father ever tell you that doing the right thing feels terrible?" Marcus said. "Every time," I said, and he was right every time. Marcus picked up the financial records and looked at the top page. Then he set them down and reached into his jacket for his phone. I left him there making calls and walked back to my car on Ocean Avenue. The salt air came off the water cold and direct the way November air did this close to the Pacific, cutting through everything. My phone buzzed. A text from the number Agent Walsh had given me. "Crane knows you can hear. Don't go home tonight." I stood on the sidewalk and read the message twice. Then I looked out at the gray water and thought about 4 victims and 2 empty chairs and a man in Burbank who had just realized his window was closing. I called Thomas Reed and told him we were out of time. I did not go home that night. I stayed at a hotel on Wilshire and ordered room service. I did not eat and sat by the window watching the city until 2 in the morning. Then I went back, because there are things you cannot run from, and Daniel was one of them. I came through the front door of the Pasadena house at 8:15 on a Thursday morning, and Sophie hit me at the knees before I had taken 3 steps inside. She was wearing her pajamas yellow, with small white stars, and she wrapped both arms around my legs and pressed her face against my coat and held on with the total physical commitment that 4-year-olds brought to everything. I reached down and picked her up, and she grabbed my face in both hands and examined me with the focused seriousness of someone conducting an important inspection. "You were gone," she said. I said. "I'm back." She considered this. Then she wriggled out of my arms and grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the stairs with the urgent purposefulness of a child who had been waiting to do something and had run out of patience for preamble. She led me to the master bedroom. Emily was not home. Her car had not been in the driveway, which I had noted before I came through the door. Sophie went directly to the low dresser on Emily's side of the room and pointed at the second drawer, the one with the small brass lock. Then she reached into the pocket of her pajama top and produced a key. My heart stopped for 1 full second. "Mommy was looking for this yesterday," Sophie said. She was very upset. She looked everywhere. She held the key out to me with the matter-of-fact generosity of a child who solved problems by addressing them directly. "I think she put something in there for you. She said it was for you." I took the key. My hand was absolutely steady. I did not know how. The drawer opened. Inside, taped to the bottom surface, was a small USB drive, black standard, entirely unremarkable. The kind of thing you would walk past 100 times without noticing if you did not know to look. I pocketed it and closed the drawer and locked it and put the key back in Sophie's hand and told her she should put it somewhere safe. She nodded with great gravity and tucked it back into her pajama pocket. That evening, Daniel knocked on my bedroom door and waited. That was new. For 2 years he had knocked and entered simultaneously. The knock, a formality rather than a request. Tonight he stood in the doorway and looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face in a very long time, not since he was much younger, and had broken something he valued and needed to tell me about it. He sat in the chair across from me and put his elbows on his knees and looked at his hands. "I didn't know what she was going to do," he said. "When it happened, when I found out 6 months later what Crane had actually done, I confronted her." His voice was tight and controlled, and underneath the control was something that had been compressed for a long time. She showed me emails, from my address to Crane, laying out the whole thing. I didn't write them. I didn't know if they were real or if she had manufactured them. And she told me that if I went to you, she would go to the DA first, and I would be the one who had planned all of it. His hands pressed together between his knees, fingers interlaced so tightly that the knuckles went pale. "I was a coward," he said. That is the truth of it. I could dress it up in a dozen different ways, but that is what it comes down to. I was afraid, and I stayed quiet, and every month that passed made it harder to imagine a way out that didn't destroy everything. He looked up at me. His eyes were red at the edges. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I needed you to know that. I sat across from my son and looked at his face, the face I had known since the moment it existed, and I thought about the distance between who a person was and who they became when they were frightened enough and long enough, and I thought about all the ways I had failed to teach him that fear was not a reason. I stood up. I walked to where he was sitting, and I put my hand on his shoulder one moment, firm and brief, and then I turned back to my desk and opened my laptop. Tell them everything, I said. When the time comes, every single thing you know. Daniel sat there for another minute. Then he stood and walked to the door. The court date is in 5 days, he said. I know, I said. He left. I began typing the email to Thomas Reed that would set the final pieces in motion, and I thought about a small USB drive in my coat pocket and a 4-year-old girl who had solved in 30 seconds what 2 years of careful planning had not. Stanley Mosque, courthouse on a Tuesday morning in December, looked exactly like what it was, a building that had seen too much human desperation to be impressed by any particular version of it. Gray concrete, fluorescent light, the smell of paper, and waiting. I had been inside courthouses before for contracts and filings, and the ordinary business of running a company for 30 years. I had never been inside one as the subject of the proceeding. Thomas Reed met me in the lobby at 8:45. He looked at my face and said nothing, which was the right choice. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Judge Patricia Hale was already on the bench when we entered a woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the expression of someone who had heard every variation of every story and was prepared to hear this one without prejudice and without patience for delay. Daniel was at the respondent's table with Gerald Marsh. He did not look at me when I came in. Emily sat in the gallery's second row, her hands folded in her lap, her face composed into the expression she wore when she was most dangerous, perfectly neutral, perfectly present, waiting. Gerald Marsh presented the conservatorship petition with the polished efficiency of a man who had done this many times. Medical documentation, expert testimony, a pattern of cognitive and communicative impairment. He was good. He made it sound inevitable. Then Thomas Reed stood up. He placed a small evidence box on the table in front of Judge Hale. He opened it and removed the device smaller than a pencil eraser, dull and inert, sitting in a labeled specimen bag. This object, Thomas said, was removed from my client's ear canal 12 days ago by a licensed hearing rehabilitation technician. It is a bone conduction signal jamming device engineered to generate continuous low-frequency interference that causes the brain to suppress auditory input. It does not damage hearing. It simulates the absence of hearing. My client has not been deaf for 2 years. He has been made to appear deaf. The room went very still. Daniel's pen stopped moving against his notepad. Emily's hands folded in her lap, pressed together slightly harder. Judge Hale looked at the specimen bag. Then she looked at me. Mr. Calloway, she said, I'd like to hear from you directly. I stood. Your Honor, I said. My voice came out steady and clear, and I watched Gerald Marsh's face process the fact that I was speaking without any assistive device, without any interpreter, without any of the accommodations his entire case had been built around. My name is Richard Calloway. I founded AudioMed Solutions 30 years ago. I have spent my entire career helping people hear, and for 2 years someone used my own field against me to make sure I couldn't. Judge Hale held up one hand toward Gerald Marsh, who had begun to rise. When did your hearing return? She asked me. Partially, I said approximately 8 months ago. 10 to 15% enough to detect sound, not enough to understand speech or act on what I was experiencing. I did not disclose it because I could not be certain it was real and not perceptual, and because I had reason to believe that any change in my presentation would be used to further the case being built against me. I met her eyes. Fully 11 days ago, when the device was removed. You concealed a change in your medical condition, Gerald Marsh said from across the room. Judge Hale looked at him with the expression of a woman who did not appreciate being spoken over. Mr. Marsh, I will ask the questions. She turned back to me. Mr. Calloway is there, a reason you did not immediately report the partial recovery to your treating physician. En onde das 6 dias en verdade. The treating physician whose department received a $500,000 grant from my son's foundation the week after he filed my original diagnosis, I said. Yes, Your Honor, there were several reasons. Thomas Reed then laid out the full record. Financial transfers $2,340,000 from AudioMed's research fund to Pacific Neurological Associates to a personal account registered to Emily Cross before her marriage to my son. The USB video. Emily's own voice, her own face explaining to Philip Crane exactly what the device was designed to do and why. Marcus Webb's recorded statement. Dr. Holt's new evaluation. The forensic analysis of the email account used to threaten Daniel into compliance IP address traced to Emily's office in Beverly Hills, not to any device registered to my son. Judge Hale read through the submissions with the focused attention of someone who intended to get this right. Then she looked up. The petition for conservatorship is denied, she said. I am referring the matter to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. She removed her glasses. Mr. Calloway, you are free to go. I walked out of that courtroom on my own 2 feet and stood in the hallway and pressed my back against the wall and let out a breath that felt like it had been held for 2 years. Emily came out 30 seconds later. She walked past me without stopping, but she turned her head as she passed and said quietly enough that only I could hear, "You think you won? You haven't won anything yet." Then she kept walking. I watched her go and thought she might be right, but she was wrong about one thing. I had already won the only thing that had ever actually mattered. I had my voice back, and I intended to use it. Thomas Reed called me at 2:17 in the afternoon, less than 24 hours after Judge Hale had cleared the courtroom. She filed a will, he said. I was sitting in my car in the parking structure of the hotel on Wilshire, where I had been staying since Walsh's warning. I had been eating a sandwich I did not taste and thinking about nothing in particular, which was the closest I had come to rest in 2 weeks. What kind of will? I said. Dated 14 months ago, Thomas said. During the period when you were legally considered to lack capacity, it transfers your entire interest in AudioMed Solutions to Daniel effective immediately upon your voluntary relinquishment of control. There are 2 witnesses listed, both current AudioMed employees. He paused. The signature is not yours, Richard. I set the sandwich down. She moved fast, I said. She had it prepared in advance, Thomas said. This was not improvised. She filed it this morning, 40 minutes after Judge Hale's ruling. She was sitting in that courtroom yesterday with this document already signed and witnessed and ready to submit the moment she needed it. I thought about Emily in the gallery, hands folded, face composed, watching the proceeding with the patience of someone who had prepared for multiple outcomes and had simply been waiting to see which contingency to activate. Forgery, I said. California Penal Code 470. Thomas confirmed, and because it was filed in an active court proceeding, it also constitutes fraud upon the court under Penal Code 132, a separate felony charge. The witnesses who signed it are potentially accessories. He let that sit. But Richard, she has 2 people who will testify they watched you sign it. That complicates things. I looked out through the windshield at the concrete wall of the parking structure and thought about what it cost to be the kind of person who prepared for contingencies the way Emily did, what it required, what it hollowed out. The USB, I said. Already submitted to the DA's office this morning, Thomas said. The video predates the will by 8 months. It establishes that she knew exactly what she was doing, that she planned it, that the device in your ear was not an experiment or a mistake, but a deliberate act with a specific goal. A brief pause. Premeditation? Richard? First degree on every count. The will actually helps us. It demonstrates that her intent to defraud was continuous and ongoing, not a single impulsive act. Helen had said something to me once early in our marriage, during an argument I could no longer remember the specifics of. We had resolved whatever it was, and she had said quietly in the way she said the things she meant most. The hardest thing about being a good man is knowing when justice and mercy are not the same thing. I had thought about that sentence many times in the years since she said it. I thought about it now, sitting in a parking structure with a half-eaten sandwich and a phone pressed to my ear, and for the first time, I felt like I understood what she had meant by it. Justice was what the USB would deliver. Mercy was what I would have to decide about separately later, when there was space to decide it, without the pressure of the immediate closing in. What about the witnesses? I said. The DA's office will handle them, Thomas said. Forensic analysis of the document should be sufficient. Paper ink signature pressure, a forged signature on a legal document, leaves traces that are very difficult to manufacture, convincingly. Another pause. She's good, Richard, but she overreached. The will was one step too many. She always believed she was the smartest person in the room, I said. Most people who do things like this do, Thomas said. It's usually what stops them. I picked the sandwich back up. I took a bite and chewed and swallowed and thought about a woman who had been planning this for years, possibly a decade, who had walked into a courtroom yesterday with a forged document in her bag and watched everything she had built get dismantled piece by piece, and who had still filed that document this morning rather than accept the result. There was something almost clarifying about that level of commitment to a wrong thing. It removed ambiguity. It made the path forward very clean. File whatever needs to be filed, I said. And Thomas makes sure the DA has everything. The USB, the financial records, the forensic analysis from Walsh's team. All of it. Already done, Thomas said. I finished the sandwich. It still did not taste like anything, but I finished it anyway because there were 5 more things that needed to happen before this was over, and I was going to need the energy. The DA's office contacted Daniel on a Wednesday morning and offered him a choice. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges, misdemeanor counts, rather than felony, criminal conspiracy, no prison time, 5 years probation, prohibition from serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded company in California. Daniel took 4 hours to answer. Then he asked to see me. They gave us a small conference room with no windows and a table that had seen better decades. Daniel was already there when I came in. He looked like a man who had not slept in several days, which was accurate. His suit jacket was off, draped over the back of his chair. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow. He had the unguarded look of someone who had stopped maintaining appearances because he no longer had the energy for it. He looked up when I came in, and for a moment neither of us said anything because some rooms require a moment before they can be inhabited properly. The forensic analysis came back, he said finally. The email's the ones Emily showed me from my account to Crane. The IP address doesn't match any device I've ever owned. She created an account that looked like mine. He pressed both hands flat on the table. I didn't know if they were real. She made sure I didn't know. That was the whole point. I know, I said. I should have come to you, he said. His voice cracked on the last word, a small fracture quickly controlled, but there. When I found out what she had actually done, I should have come to you immediately and told you everything and let the consequences be whatever they were going to be. His jaw tightened. Instead, I spent 2 years telling myself that staying quiet was protecting you from something worse. That was not honest. I was protecting myself. He looked at his hands on the table, a man examining his own evidence. The company, he said. Audiomed. I know what it means. I know what 30 years of your life went into it. I told myself I was ready to lead it, that I had earned the right that you were holding on past the point that made sense. He exhaled. I believe that, but believing something doesn't make it a reason for what I allowed to happen. I had been standing near the door. I walked to the table and sat down across from him, and I looked at my son, 35 years old, exhausted, stripped of every performance he had been maintaining, and I thought about what it meant to watch someone you had made arrive at the place where they finally had to look at themselves without any of the architecture they had built to avoid it. It was not satisfying. I want to be honest about that. There was nothing in this room that felt like resolution. There was only the hard, specific reality of 2 people who had loved each other badly for a long time, sitting across a table with no exits. Tell them everything, I said. Every conversation, every document, every decision you made, and every one you let Emily make for you. All of it. Daniel nodded. His eyes were red at the edges, and he did not try to hide it. I stood up. I walked around the table, and I put my hand on his shoulder. I held it there longer than I intended. Then I walked to the door. Dad, he said. I stopped. I'm sorry, he said. Not for the legal record, just, I'm sorry. I did not turn around. I know, I said, and I walked out. Lily was in the hallway. She had been waiting with the patience of someone accustomed to waiting in hallways outside rooms where difficult things were happening. How did it go? She said. He's going to cooperate, I said. She nodded. Then she looked at me with the particular attention she brought to things she considered worth saying carefully. You okay? No, I said, but I will be. She accepted that without comment, which was exactly right. We walked to the elevator together, and she pressed the button, and we stood there, and I thought about a boy who had once sat in my research lab asking how sound worked, and a man in a windowless room who had finally told the truth and the distance between those two things that I would be measuring for a long time. "Why did you help me?" I said. "When you didn't know me, when you had no reason to." Lily looked at the elevator doors. "My father was in a situation like yours," she said. "Different specifics, same shape. By the time I understood what I was looking at, it was too late." Her voice was even and factual, and underneath it was something she had been carrying for years. I became very good at recognizing the signs afterward. I decided that the next time I recognized them, I was going to do something about it before the afterward arrived. The elevator opened. We stepped in. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Emily's still out there." Justice does not always arrive the way you imagine it. Sometimes it arrives at an airport departure gate at 6:45 in the morning with 2 federal agents and a passport hold that Emily Cross Calloway had not anticipated because she had believed until that moment that she had prepared for every contingency. Agent Walsh called me while I was having coffee in the hotel room on Wilshire. "She's in custody," he said. "LAX Terminal B. She had a ticket to Singapore. Business class window seat check, 2 bags." A brief pause that carried a quality I had learned to read as Walsh's version of satisfaction. The passport hold was filed the morning of the hearing before Judge Hale had even taken the bench. Walsh's team had not waited for the outcome. She didn't know about it until she handed her documents to the gate agent. I set my coffee down. "Ann Crane, Las Vegas. He was picked up this morning at his apartment off Flamingo Road. Nevada authorities transferred him under the Uniform Criminal Extradition Act. That process was running parallel to the passport hold, which is why it moved quickly." Walsh's voice was level and precise. "He's already talking. He talked before his attorney arrived, which is either very stupid or a sign that he understood exactly how much trouble he was in, and decided that cooperation was his only exit." I walked to the window and looked out at the Los Angeles morning, gray and cool, the kind of December day the city produced when it remembered that winter was technically happening. "The other victims," I said. "The 4 you mentioned? We've formally identified all 4 now," Walsh said. 2 in California, 2 in Nevada. The 2 who are no longer living, one was 71 years old, a retired architect in Sacramento. The other was 68, a former hotel chain owner in Reno. Both died of causes unrelated to the device, but both experienced significant health deterioration during the period of isolation. The families did not know what had actually happened to them. A pause. "They know now. We contacted them this week." I thought about those 2 men, people I had never met who had sat in that office on Olive Avenue in Burbank and trusted the wrong person for reasons that probably seemed reasonable at the time. "What does Emily face?" I said. "On the California charges alone, dependent adult abuse, conspiracy, identity fraud, forgery fraud, upon the court. The federal wire fraud charge adds a separate count. She's looking at a minimum of 5 years, likely more, depending on what Crane's testimony produces." Walsh cleared his throat. "There's something else. During the background investigation, we found a prior incident. New York, 2014. Her father. I had been expecting something. Not this specifically, but something." "Tell me," I said. "Similar pattern," Walsh said. "Her father was 73, owned commercial real estate in Manhattan. He began showing signs of what his physicians described as rapid cognitive decline. He was placed under the care of a private specialist Emily had recommended. He died 8 months later, heart failure officially. Emily was the sole beneficiary of his estate." A pause. "No charges were ever filed. He died before the situation was examined closely enough to raise questions. There was no prior case, no criminal record, nothing that would have flagged her." I stood at the window, with the phone against my ear, and thought about a 73-year-old man in Manhattan who had probably trusted his daughter the way I had trusted my son, who had probably believed right up until the end that the people closest to him were the safest ones. "She did this before," I said, "and no one stopped her." "No," Walsh said, "no one stopped her." I thanked him and ended the call and stood there for another few minutes. The city outside the window was doing what it always did, moving, indifferent, enormous, entirely unaware that any of this had happened or mattered. Then my phone rang again. Thomas Reed. The DA's office has everything, he said. Crane's initial statement corroborates the USB video in full. Emily directed the entire operation. Daniel was brought in after the fact and coerced into silence. A brief pause. It's over, Richard. I thought about that word, over, what it meant and what it did not mean. What was finished and what would continue in different forms for a long time. Not entirely, I said. No, Thomas agreed. Not entirely. That evening, Maggie called. Her voice was quiet and careful, in the way it was when she had been holding something back and had decided the time for holding back had passed. Richard, she said, there's something I haven't told you yet. About Helen. About something I found in the files before I left AudioMed. A pause. Come to my house. I'll show you. Maggie lived in a small house in Eagle Rock with a front porch and a Meyer lemon tree in the yard that she had planted the year she turned 50, and that had she once told me, produced exactly enough lemons each season to make her feel the effort had been worthwhile. She was waiting at the door when I arrived. She brought me to her kitchen table and set coffee in front of me and sat across from me and placed a single printed page between us. I found this in the archived correspondence files 2 weeks before Daniel fired me, she said. I printed it because something about it felt wrong. I did not understand why until much later. I looked at the page. It was an email, dated September of 2013, sent from Daniel's AudioMed account to an address I did not immediately recognize, a personal Gmail account, with a name that meant nothing to me at first and then meant everything. Emily Cross. Not Emily Cross Calloway. Emily Cross. 2 years before they were supposed to have met at a company event. 2 years before Daniel had introduced her to me as someone new in his life. The email was 3 paragraphs. Daniel asking Emily for advice on how to approach his mother, how to get Helen to help him convince me to accelerate the transfer of operational control at AudioMed. He described me as difficult and resistant to change. He described the company as something he had been waiting to lead for years. The tone was not that of a man writing to a stranger. It was the tone of a man writing to someone who already understood the situation, because she had helped him think through it before. I read it twice. My chest felt like something had been placed on it that was not going to be moved. He knew her before, I said. By at least 2 years, Maggie said. Possibly longer. The email suggests they had already discussed this. She was already advising him. She folded her hands on the table. Richard, I am sorry. I should have shown you this the morning we met at the coffee shop. I was not sure what it meant, and I was afraid of what it would do to you. I looked at the lemon tree through Maggie's kitchen window. Yellow fruit against green leaves in the December light. Then Thomas Reed called. He had been reviewing the full archive of correspondence the DA had subpoenaed from Emily's devices. He had found what he was looking for, and he wanted me to know before I heard it from anyone else. Helen had written more than one letter before she died. The letter to Thomas with the instructions about the hearing specialist was one. The other she had written to me, and she had told Thomas to hold it until I was ready. Not until the legal situation was resolved. Until I was ready. She wrote it in 2014, Thomas said. A few months before she passed, she said, and I am reading this exactly. Richard, she said, I have met the woman Daniel has chosen, and I do not trust her. I cannot explain this in terms that would satisfy a reasonable person. I only know what I know. If I am wrong, these letters will sit in Thomas's drawer forever, and no harm will be done. If I am right, I want Richard to know that I saw it even if I could not stop it, and that everything I did because I could not bear the thought of him being alone in it. My throat closed entirely. I pressed the phone against my ear and looked at Maggie's kitchen ceiling and breathed through my nose until I could trust my voice. She knew, I said. She knew something, Thomas said gently. She acted on what she knew in the only way available to her, and she was right. I ended the call and sat at Maggie's kitchen table for a long time. Maggie did not speak. She refilled my coffee and sat across from me and let the morning be what it was. Eventually, I stood and thanked her and drove to the house I had rented in Brentwood after leaving Pasadena. I went to the backyard and sat on the steps and looked up at the sky, blue and clear, the way Los Angeles sky was blue and clear when it decided to be without qualification. Lily was there. She had been helping me manage logistics for the past week and had a key. She came out and sat beside me and did not ask me anything. After a while, I said she saw Emily once, in 2013, one afternoon, and she spent the next year preparing for the possibility that she was right about what she had seen. Lily looked at the sky. What kind of person does that? The kind who paid attention, I said. The kind who loved someone enough to protect them from something she couldn't even name. I looked at my hands resting on my knees, the hands of a 66-year-old man who had spent his life studying how the world made sound, and who had needed his wife to hear the one thing that mattered most. I should have listened more carefully, I said. Lily turned and looked at me. You're listening now, she said. 6 months is not a long time. It is long enough to understand what you want the rest of your life to look like. Emily Cross Calloway was awaiting trial on 6 felony counts. Her attorneys had filed 3 continuances and would likely file more, which was how these things worked, slowly, deliberately, with complete indifference to anyone's sense of closure. Philip Crane had accepted a plea agreement, 6 years federal facility, full cooperation, with the ongoing investigation into the other families. 2 of those families were now pursuing civil suits. The third had decided they preferred to grieve privately, which was their right. Daniel was in the process of fulfilling the terms of his cooperation agreement, 5 years probation, a civil penalty that would take years to pay, a prohibition from serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded California company until 2028. He lived in a small apartment in Koreatown, and, as far as I knew, was working as a business consultant for a firm that did not require him to disclose the prohibition. I did not ask for details. I was not ready to ask for details. AudioMed Solutions had not been sold. Maggie Osei became Chief Executive Officer on the 1st of February, which was a Thursday, which was the kind of detail she would have noted. And I did note because Maggie had always believed that the day of the week mattered. She sent me a text that morning, first day. The coffee machine is broken, and I already love this job. I read it 3 times. Lily Harper joined AudioMed as head of clinical technology in March. When she asked during the conversation where I offered her the position, whether I was doing this, because I felt I owed her something, I told her the truth I was doing it because she was the only person in that ballroom who had looked twice. She accepted. I opened a new research division, small focused, staffed by 4 people who understood what we were trying to build technology to detect unauthorized interference with human auditory function, so that the next person who sat in a chair on Olive Avenue in Burbank would have someone somewhere looking for them. A month after that, an envelope arrived at my office at AudioMed. No return address. Inside was a piece of paper child's drawing crayon, the specific ambition of someone who was 4 years old and completely certain of her artistic vision. 2 figures standing under a tree, one tall, one shorter. A sun in the upper right corner, grass the color of a traffic light. Underneath, in the handwriting of a child who had recently learned that letters made words, "I love you both." I held that drawing for a long time. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the top drawer of my desk next to a photograph of Helen and a key to a research lab that I had been using again. I did not call Daniel that day. I was not ready. But I did not throw the drawing away, and I thought that meant something, though I could not yet say exactly what. That evening, I went to the old research lab, the room where AudioMed had started, where Helen had slept on the couch while I worked, where everything I had built had its beginning. I sat at the desk and opened a new notebook and wrote a title on the first page, "The Sound of Silence, What 2 Years." Without hearing taught me about listening. I put the pen down. Outside the window, Los Angeles was doing what it always did, moving in different, enormous, full of people living lives that mattered completely to them and to no one else. I could hear all of it. Traffic and wind and someone's music through the wall and the particular hum of a city that never fully quieted. I listened. Just listened, and for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. People ask me what 2 years of silence taught me. Here is the truth. The most dangerous betrayal is not the one that comes from strangers. It comes from the hand you have held the longest. This family story began with trust given too freely and ended with something I did not expect, not anger, but clarity. I was not blameless. I gave everything to my son and forgot that love without honesty is not protection. It is permission. Do not be like me. Watch the quiet moments. Watch who changes when they think you cannot see them. I believe God does not waste hard seasons. Every family betrayal I lived through built something in me that comfort never could have reached. My personal opinion, and I say this plainly, is that silence is not weakness. Sometimes it is the most powerful choice a person can make. Speak when you are ready, not before. This has been a family story about what we lose when we stop listening and what we find when we finally begin. If it touched something in you, leave a comment below and tell me your thoughts. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe to this channel. There is more coming. Thank you for staying until the very last word. That means everything. The stories on this channel contain fictional elements created for the purpose of reflection and education. If this type of content is not your preference, we fully respect that. Please feel free to explore what suits you best.